Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode of The House of Mystery is brought to you by Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. LegacyFoodStorage.com.
New U.S. sanctions on Iran took effect today, 6 months after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the international nuclear deal.
The sanctions target Iran's shipping, financial, and energy sectors, all key to the country's already struggling economy.
The bombs, which the FBI referred to as improvised explosive devices, were sent to the FBI's bomb laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
We're in Mexico again tonight as thousands of migrants try to find a faster way to the U.S. border. The White House says it's now getting help from the Mexican government.
Breaking news out of Pittsburgh. The man accused in the shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh is pleading not guilty, and he also wants a jury trial. You can see he's facing 44 counts. So
in the final seconds before the Boeing 737 MAX crashed into the water, it was traveling at more than 500 kilometers an hour. All 189 people on board were killed.
You've now entered the House of Mystery.
Crime, conspiracy, history, and science.
With your hosts, Al Warren, Mike Brown,
Julie Sav, Michael Butterfield,
Dr. Joseph Usinski, and Michael Hawley.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and of course today I'm your host, Al Warren. Joining me in the co-host seat, I guess we should say, is John Copenhaver. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well, staying sane, I think. Well, I'll let you be the judge.
Staying sane in the U.S. is not possible. We're not in that kind of place right now. Speaking of not staying sane, okay, so we've got an incredible author and musician, rock star. He does it all. We've got Ronald Malfi. Thank you for being here, Ronald.
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
You've got quite the life. I mean, Greg DeFuni actually sent you to me, and I just and I appreciate getting good writers and that. But you do it all, don't you? You play music and you just got it all going on.
I try to do as much as I can to keep away from my wife and kids. So yeah,
this is going to be broadcast. So.
Like they're going to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah, that's true. That's what marriage is, right? They don't listen. Wow. So okay, so you're pretty talented. I look at this, and I think, well, so how did you get into writing first of all? Like, what brought you into that world?
Yeah, I was an avid reader when I was younger, and probably around the age 10 or 11 years old, I think I remember buying an old typewriter and at a yard sale, and I just started writing my own stories, just like I kind of did with anything creative back then. I was into music, drawing, writing, and it just kind of stuck with me, and throughout high school and into college, I just was always convinced and telling myself, well, once I go to the real world, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write novels, and that's going to be my job, and that's what I'm going to do. And it was very, very, very glorified idea of what that meant to be. But it was also, trying to put off having a real job for as long as possible. So, the habit stuck with me. And when I graduated college, by that time I had already had about half a dozen full-length novel manuscripts written that I'd written throughout high school and college. And I just took the best one that I had and shopped it around and ultimately found a publisher for it. And this would have been like in 2000. As soon as I got that book deal, I thought, I'm here. I've arrived. This is great. And then, as you guys, as any real writer knows, that the reality sets in over the next, intervening 12 months. And I realized, oh boy, this is not what, I can't just sit back and sip my cognac with my leather patches on my sports jacket just yet. So that turned into a kind of a 2-decade long, I guess now, love affair with just writing and finding a good home for the books and slowly and steadily building a fan base. I was never one to I didn't write the one great best-selling novel right out of the gate and to rest on my laurels. It's always been a job, but I love it, and it's like I said, it's persisted now into this would be its 21st year, I guess.
Well, writing a first novel that's a bestseller is not that good anyway, because usually the publisher takes, a huge chunk of that money, and then you're under the pressure to write something to follow up.
Well, I would take it just to see how it works. I won't knock it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I tell you. So when did you get the confidence to feel not so much when, but what gave you the confidence to actually send a book in and to get it published? Like, this is something a lot of writers deal with all the time. What was it about your writing that convinced you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever even thought of it that way. I never questioned it. I just kind of went with it and just said, well, I love to write. I enjoy writing. I think what I write is decent and passable, which is probably the best you'll ever hear me say about it. And for me, the next logical step was then, okay, let's see if I can get it published and to go from there. And even with the shoebox full of rejection slips and they used to, back then they were showing up in the mail, and you collect all those things. I never questioned, it was never brought down by the rejections. I was never, turned away from this or felt, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. It just never occurred to me. I just kept plugging away and figured, when I send the right thing to the right person, that's when it'll click. And that's just how I approached it. So yeah. Maybe I'm just stupid.
Sounds healthy to me.
Yeah.
I guess.
I think it's a good thing, because then you're focusing on what you're doing and not so much the noise outside. But when you look back over 20 years to the earliest stuff, even the first book you got published, do you ever read it over and look at it and kind of go, oh, I would do this different, or I would change this? What do you think of that?
Al, I do that with the last manuscript I just edited and turned to my agent. My first book is justifiably and blessedly out of print. When you're young and you're hungry to get your stuff out there, there's a part of you, at 20 or whatever, or 21 or however old I was, you're still also learning your craft. And I think that with that book, my determination to be a published author overrode my talent at the time. So I, probably, if that book fell on anybody's desk at Random House, they would have laughed at me. But I found a smaller press that was willing to take a chance on I was a local author in that they were based in Maryland where I live, and I went with them. And it was sort of an exercise in trust, I guess, on both sides. But dude, I don't know. Does that book deserve to see the mass market? No, I don't think so. But really, I would say probably out of all my other things that have been published, that's probably the only one I feel that way about it. In that regard, because I I was just still learning, and I think by the time my second book came out, I just kind of had a rhythm to it and an understanding of, what didn't work the first go around and what didn't work in those early manuscripts that I was just having fun writing, but also, what did work and what I, and I was reading voraciously throughout college and right after that first book came out, and not just in the horror genre where I write, but pretty much anything I can get my hands on. Even bad books, and you learn what's a bad book, what's a good book, why something works, why something doesn't, what narrative voice you most relate to, and why certain scenes will evoke certain emotion in you as a reader. All that stuff. I loved, kind of, dousing myself in just any piece of fiction I could find. And that kind of changed from my first published book to my second one. I was much more well read and well written, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think we learn as we go. We get better, but our hunger gets less. Isn't that true?
Our hunger? Yes.
Yeah.
To touch on that, that's probably even more of a poignant statement, I think, maybe than you realize. I was a year or two ago, I was asked to submit a story for this anthology. It was one of these themed anthologies, so it had to fit into whatever little box they were looking for. So I said, you know what? I wrote a story like years ago, like when I was in high school, that the story would fit perfect for this, but clearly would need to be rewritten, so it doesn't sound like an idiot wrote it. So I fished the old story out. I read it. And I said, yeah, I could rewrite this and make this really cool, and this will fit for the anthology. But what I've realized, and I rewrote it, and it was fine, and it worked, and it was professional, and I turned it in. But what I realized is I was unable to capture the pure zeal that I was feeling coming from I'm reading this going, I can still remember that high school kid staying up late at night, hammering on that typewriter, pumping this story out. And that the energy and the excitement in there is something that, now at 43 years old, I couldn't catch it if I had roller skates and a butterfly net. It's just a different time. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I've noticed that.
Well, I think that's part of it, because as you read more, you grow more. Because for myself, as I get better, and as age comes along, why I say when I look back at earlier books is because I didn't know as much. I wasn't as good a writer. And also there's a tremendous amount of pressure you put on yourself when you read good books, and you know that they're good, and you want to be that good. I think that's a lot of pressure. So we try to get to that place sometimes faster than we really can, Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's the problem with reading great books, is I think that if any normal person who wants to be a writer reads a bunch of great books and they go, ooh, well, maybe this is a little too, maybe I shouldn't be trying this. This stuff is too good, Yeah. But then, some sociopath like me goes, no, I could try that too. See if I can do it, It's just like people, you talk about music. It's like sometimes a guitar player will hear a great guitarist and they go, why do I even bother? This guy's so good. But other people will hear that same guitarist and go, nah, I'm going to work harder. It's just how you're built, I guess.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. So why horror? Why in the dark realm do you write?
You know what? I don't know if you actually really, for me, pick, and I'm sure you've heard other genre writers say this. I know Greg Hume would back me on it. I don't think you really pick what it is that you write. I think it's just what comes naturally, what you're most acclimated towards. I love to read that sort of stuff growing up. I love horror movies, and so when it was just natural for me to write that sort of stuff. But that said, I mean, the horror element in most of my books is, arguably slight. The minor, if you're looking for, zombies, werewolves, vampires, that sort of thing, it's not going to be found in my stuff. I really kind of like to delve into the psychological aspect of characters, and even with this new book I've been working on, it's arguably a supernatural thriller, but I underscore the word arguably, I guess.
Well, so you're kind of taken from the Alfred Hitchcock, more about the mental terror or horror than gore.
Well, you know what, to a degree, and the reason what I found is, like, a lot of my earlier books were more firmly horror novels. They had clear supernatural elements to it, and that was unarguable. What I learned, at least for myself, is that I felt that the better I got as a writer, with character, with atmosphere, description, with telling a story that didn't always need to even, rely on a supernatural gimmick, for lack of a better term, that I found it harder to go and still utilize those elements for it, because I felt it almost weakened this character structure that I was setting up. You know, if you're writing this, you know, real intense family drama, you know, between the characters, it's tough to kind of put a serial killing supernatural clown into that story. You know, for me it was, and I was starting to see kind of the zippers and the ropes and pulleys behind the stage curtain, you know, if you will, when I was doing that for some of my later stuff. So I just gradually kind of fell away from just being so overt about it. And it just seems more natural to tell a story that way now.
So your characters, they're very important to you. How do you put them together? How do you develop them, and where do you get them from?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, characters are generally one of the first things that come to mind before I even start working on a book, and sometimes even before story or any kind of plot detail. You know, I'll think about, oh, you know, here's a character. What how do they go about their lives? What's going on here? Why is this person interesting and sticking in my head for some reason? And, you know, I try to think, well, what story surrounds them? Or if I have another story in mind, I go, can this person, you know, if he was in that world, what would happen to you know, how would they react? So I'm a very character-driven author. You know, I think, I mean, that's the hallmark of the story. It holds it together. I've never been a plot-driven writer. I don't outline or do, you know, the plot machinations bore me, and I find them a little tedious. But I think a good character can move a story along on their own without the need of the mechanics of a plot. So, you know, as far as where they come from, you know, it's all over. It's something that you could witness somebody do. It could be an amalgamation of different people, you know. You know, I've got, I mean, this question is a nice segue into this. I've got a new book coming out in July called Come With Me. And that book came to me really in two places. The first thing to kind of set my mind thinking about it was the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, great.
It's a fantastic book, and it kind of details her surreptitious research into the Golden State Killer for years, and just, you know, I was fascinated by the story. Serial killers are cool, and I just kind of liked her what she was doing. I just found that impressive. So I that was sort of like one seed that was planted, and I didn't have a story around that. I just kind of liked that concept and found myself reading the book and kind of haunted by the idea of it. And then another thing that happened, unfortunately, really, was a good friend of mine was shot and killed she was a journalist, and she was one of the 5 journalists that were shot and killed in the Capitol Gazette newspaper mass shooting. Mm-hmm. And her, you know, that was it was a shock, and in dealing with some of that grief, I was I almost unconsciously found myself putting her, who I knew her as a person, and how determined and what a chronicler of our neighborhood, what just a great all around journalist and a great person and a great mother and friend and all this stuff, how she would fit into this world that I had started creating in my head about these serial killings that have happened over decades, you know, similar to the Golden State Killer, and what her role could have been or would have been, you know, in that in any regard, you know, just immersing someone of her high spirit and brightness into a world that dark. And I wanted to see what that dichotomy was, and the writing of it was really sort of an exercise in grief for me. It was a little personal grief counseling, because I was really mourning her life during the writing of that book. But it also kind of helped me get over a lot of issues too. So that's a downer of an answer, I guess, to your question of where my characters come from. But it's also probably the best example I could give you too.
Well, you know, I think personally, like my favorite horror stories are often they really are centered around character. and like that sort of question of, these big human emotions like grief or, even sort of questioning your sanity, playing out through horror fiction. I mean, is that, I'm kind of asking a little bit selfishly, because although I'm a crime writer so far, I've been writing a ghost story recently. Yeah. And so it's just interesting kind of like, to what degree these big emotions are playing a role that are very specific to this genre. Do you think that's true, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's specific to the genre. I think for me, it's true for anything you write. I mean, particularly from not just a reader, but as a writer. I mean, if you're going to write a book, this is something you're going to spend a good portion of your time with, months to years to, however long it takes somebody to write a book. So it's got to be worth telling. And if the characters in the story don't have some sort of human element that makes them vulnerable or sympathetic or, anything, then is it worth then what are you telling? Is it worth the year of your life to write something about somebody who's, got no issues and everything's fine, you again, not to keep throwing his name, but, Greg Bethune, when you had him on, his fiction centers around that, man, more than any writer that comes to mind right now. I mean, his stuff is just so mired in grief and human emotion and in loss, and it's palpable. But you could see why you read one of his books and it's like, man, this thing must have been exhausting to write. But it is just so rich on the page, and so it's sort of like a give and take, I guess. The harder it is to write, maybe the stronger they come out that way. I don't know.
Doesn't that sort of make you vulnerable? But when you put something that's very personal in there, within the story itself, you're kind of exposing something about you, that's very close to you in your book. Then,
absolutely, you do, and it's probably the only true way I actually even do that. I'm not much of a crier, I guess, but my wife, I know she reads everything I write, and I would, although it's never come up, I would bet that she would think I come across on the page more vulnerable and sympathetic than I do in our marriage.
But sometimes that's your outlet, right? I mean, that's your way of expressing something internal that you can't do in everyday life.
No, exactly. So it exists. It's just I'll just throw it around freely.
but does that, when we come back to that, to one of the very first questions, so when you put something of yourself in there that's very personal, it's like a song. It's like anything. Does it we go back to the confidence. Where do you have that confidence to expose that to people, especially in today's world? Because 20 years ago was bad enough, but now you could put a book out and you get 50 reviews calling you names over something you've exposed about yourself. So it's a much touchier than it was 20 years ago. So So where does that confidence come to go, well, I don't care, I'll put this out, I like, pink underwear and butter wings, but you're going to laugh at me, but you're still going to put it out. So that's what I always like to try and discover, that confidence in a person.
Well, writing, as really kind of with any art, I think, provides a tidy little mask for the artist to hide behind. And I don't mean that really glibly, but when I'm writing something, clearly I'm not writing about myself. There are parts of me in that story, of course. There are parts of me that resonate through the characters of that story, but not wholly. And, I'm always very comfortable in the fact that what my character says and does doesn't necessarily mean that's what I say and do. This is just that scenario. And, even, John, you writing, crime fiction or anything like that, you're going to be dealing with unsavory elements. And I don't think if you're writing a story about, somebody who likes to hack the arms off of women, that people would fairly go, John must want to hack the arms off of women,
Right.
So it does, you know what, maybe we've just met, I don't know. But, so it does provide that mask. And, I see reviews where people are like, oh, I can't believe this author wrote this, or, and they miss the point. And I always see that stuff where it's like, man, that's got to be a terrible way to go through life as a reader, to just assume everything is exactly as black and white as the print on that page, to not read the nuance in something. So I don't let that bother me.
It's just because the story itself and even the characters, you could dress them up and you can mask yourself in the right cover and all that. But I'm just saying that the emotion, the pain, the fear, a lot of those very strong points that make a good psychological story in horror or anywhere, they're still real. That's how come they work. So they still come from you.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's true. I mean, you could probably look at it at a particular book of mine at any given time in my career, and someone who knows me can relate that to where I was personally in my life at that time. I wrote a book a few years back called The Night Parade, and it's going to sound a little prophetic now, but it was about a disease that basically was wiping out mankind, and about a father and his young daughter who were on the run from the government because the daughter is the cure for the disease, and he doesn't want to turn her in as a guinea pig to save mankind. And the idea came to me for that story right around the time I was, finding my way through fatherhood, and I remember telling the concept of that story to different friends of mine. Said, hey, it's a father who doesn't want to turn in his daughter to save humanity. And some of my friends said, that's terrible. He's a selfish guy and he should do the right thing for the good of the people. And other people said, no, his only responsibility is to the safety of his daughter, and he should run. And I realized, wow, so totally different responses to that story idea, and that's what cinched me. I'm like, I gotta write this book because it poses that question. Two different people can read that book and come away with completely opposing viewpoints on who this character is and whether or not they agree with what he's doing. And again, that goes back to character and the dilemma that he's in. But at the heart, it's a family drama about this father and his daughter.
It's funny because that's kind of well, not funny, but you can compare it to even today's world, with the pandemic and believers and non-believers, maskers and anti-maskers, people that just the different points of view on the same thing, and it's where people live and where they get their. It's just how they live,
Yeah. Well, that book is, even now, you talk about going back and looking at your stuff. It's a little chilling to me to read some of that now, even though it was I think it was published in 2016. But I had the research I did for that. I knew a guy who was an epidemiologist. I spoke to him. I called the World Health Organization. I called the CDC, and I basically said, hey, give me, I'm writing a novel about a fictional disease. Give me death numbers that wouldn't decimate the population, but basically bring polite society to a halt. And the numbers they gave me ultimately were like COVID numbers. But they were like, but that won't happen. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's fiction. That's fine. And then when COVID was happening and I'm watching it, I told my wife, I'm like, I hate to be that guy, but buy some canned goods, man, because this is, I heard this 4 years ago.
It's your fault. You did it.
And even everything in the book, I mean, there's issues with the masks in my book. And, and all it was if you sit there and you think, all right, really, how would this play out? That was one of the things that struck me. And in my book, it's people who, they run out of masks because everybody buys them up. They don't know if they work. And then the only other part is, instead of the anti-maskers, I had this movement of people who couldn't get their hands on a mask, but wanted to show that they were I guess in solidarity with that idea, and they would wear these paper plates over their faces with eye holes cut out, so you'd see all these weird people walking around with paper plate masks. So I thought that was kind of a pretty good visual. But
yeah, well, it's not too far off.
Yeah, no, I know. It's scary.
It's crazy.
We interrupt our programming. This is a national emergency. Important details will follow.
Are you prepared? Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. Go now to legacyfoodstorage.com. Use coupon code HOM15 now for 15% off. Quick, go!
You're listening to the House of Mystery radio show. History, crime, conspiracy, and paranormal mysteries.
Tell your brother about the voices you heard. You know their secrets, they're telling secrets, they're spreading the word. You know my life, I've been waiting on someone too much time. Every little bit, oh, I shouldn't be there, moving down the line. You got your secrets, keep your shoes by the door. I say to get ready, let it go, let it go, let it go. Come clean, come clean again. I left my money on the bedroom floor today. Come clean again. I left my money on the...
Now, Come With Me, the new book coming out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Now, your main character, I guess, is Aaron Decker. So let's talk about Aaron. Where did Aaron come from, and how did you develop a character like that?
So Aaron came on the heels of first developing Allison Decker, who is sort of the behind-the-scenes main character of that novel. And Allison is Aaron's wife, and Allison in the first chapter of the novel is killed in a shooting. And really, what I first liked about the characters, before to get into the story idea, was here's a woman who is dark and mysterious and intelligent and secretive and has but she's also frenetic, and she lives in a house and throws her clothes all over the place, and her mind is like a tornado, and I'm like, well, who would be her husband, right? And I thought of what almost would be like almost comical, like these two would never live together in real life. And I even, he was thinking about me and my wife were very opposite. So I started forming Aaron, her husband, in my head as this kind of low-key, introverted bookworm. As a career, he translates Japanese novels into English. He's studious. He's constantly turning the light off behind her when she leaves a room, and I sort of like that thing where she's the fireball in this relationship and he is just the steady, the quiet in the background, right, puttering away. And the reason what appealed to me about that relationship is because she dies in the beginning of the book. He uncovers a bunch of secrets basically from her past soon after her death. And he has to not only get out of his comfort zone to find answers to those secrets, but basically adopt his wife's persona in order to reach the end of that road. So it's his journey, and in doing so, it starts off with him feeling like he didn't know the woman he married at all. She had all this darkness behind her. And the irony there is the further he learns that she was so different than the woman he realized, the closer he becomes to her, because he kind of adopts her personality to learn and deal and cope with that stuff. So that's what appealed to me with those characters. And once I knew I had those two together, I knew it was the perfect fit for this story, which is really a gritty serial killer. I guess you could call it a thriller or a mystery or however you want to say it. But against the backdrop of something pretty heinous, this guy is totally out of his element, and he's sort of being guided by the remnants of his wife's spirit to kind of piece things together.
So you've got quite the interest, and you kind of use this a lot, the supernatural. Is there a reason for that? Is there some sort of experience that you've had or something that brings that out in your books?
No. I wouldn't even really say I believe in it. Although who knows? I mean, I don't know. But I think that there's always, like I said, that sort of thing appeals to me. I like the question mark that it posits, and to write a straightforward, for me, thriller without some hint of that element in there, it seems to not fully shade it all in perfectly for me. I always like that hint of, well, it could be this. And really, with the past few books I've written, and this one included, a reader can walk away and say, there was no supernatural element in this at all. This was just a confluence of circumstance that our unreliable narrator perceived to be X, Y, and Z. And I love that. I love the fact that you can take what away with it, what you want as a reader. So that's sort of the tightrope genre-wise that I've been walking with the past several books. It's just it's something I find fun, and it's also it's tough to do. It's tough to know how much or how little to put in to arrive at that conclusion for your reader.
Is there something you want someone to get? Like, so if I buy Come With Me and I read it,
what do you mean if?
Well, I mean, I thought I'd get one, but that's, but if you, so if someone picks up your book and reads it like this and they take it home, and besides the on-top story here that you've got, is there a subtext? Is there something you want that reader to take out of that book?
I mean, look, there's always subtext. You can enjoy this book surface level. And I think the interesting thing about Come With Me is, if anyone is so inclined that if you finish the book and then read it a second time, you'll walk away with a completely different perspective of what you thought this book was actually about. And again, it's stuff like that I tax myself with as a writer, because I find it tough to do, and I want to exercise that writing muscle and see if I can pull it off. And I do that frequently with a lot of my stuff. I had a book come out back in 2011 or so called Floating Staircase, arguably one of my better, my best-selling books, my fan favorites. People seem to like that book. And on its surface, it is a ghost story about a man trying to solve what he believes to be the murder of a young boy. With on its surface, what we're to believe to be a happy ending and a resolution. When in reality, if you read it really closely, there is a midpoint of that book where you realize that he is a horror writer, and he's narrating this book, and he's fixing the mistakes that he's made to make you, the reader, think this ended happily. And some readers, I get such a joy from readers who are able to pick up that nuance below. Because people who say, I love Floating Staircase, such a great book, a happy ending. I'm like, okay, you got some out of it. But I love the reader who goes, Floating Staircase broke my heart. I'm like, you got it. And it's very subtle, but it's there. And again, it's, I like the acrobatics that are required as a writer to kind of sew something together that neatly where it can get, overlooked by some people, a lot of subtext.
Do you think that ghost stories, by their very nature, are kind of always playing with perspective a little bit? Like you think about these sort of great kind of standards, like, The Haunting of Hill House, or, Turn of the Screw. They're always dealing with sort of a perspective which could be interpreted, right? Like, you're not sure if you're seeing there's really ghosts there, or it's just the sort of madness of the characters. I mean, that sounds sort of like a little bit what you're describing, the sort of, the playing with perspective. Is that something you do a lot of, or you seem to enjoy that, playing with that idea? But I was curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love a nice, juicy, unreliable narrator who's bringing a lot of baggage to the table and makes the reader work to think what it is they're actually being told and what's happening. Ghosts, I think, are a perfect metaphor for that. A metaphor for all the misery and grief and fear and mental anguish that we go through in our real lives, manifesting in this, spectral, this supernatural entity who may or may not be there, who may just be a projection of that character's own, horrors, their own personal concerns and beliefs. So yeah, I think ghosts are the perfect vehicle to do that sort of thing. I love a good ghost story.
Yeah.
What gets Ron Malfi going? What gets you excited? I mean that in the world today. What influenced you? What will strike something up for you? Is it other books, music, movies, people? Like what will light the fire?
Yeah, probably just like anybody. I mean, good books really. I love a good book, and I feel energized and invigorated to work on my own stuff after I've read a good book. I love music. I'm as you mentioned in the intro, I'm in a band, I guess. I don't know what the hell we're doing this year, but, that's a whole different, for me, a whole different artistic muscle to flex. But I love being, in a room with three other guys, writing music, performing music, going on stage, taking something from that's purely in your head as a sound and laying it out there and recording it for other people to hear and play and hum. And, I find that creative process really invigorating. You mentioned people, not so much. I don't like people. But.
Yeah. Oh, they're terrible.
Nice glass of scotch. That'll get me there.
Yeah. I mean, people are way down on that list. My dog is higher. Come on. It's that's terrible. Wow, that's pretty interesting. What's your advice for someone that's just writing, brand new writer?
I mean, the old go-to is to always be writing, but I'd say read everything you get your hands on, and don't just limit it to whatever genre you feel you want to write in. Read everything and learn what makes a book good. Learn what makes writing bad. Learn to, was it Hemingway who said, a good writer is born with a built-in detector. And I think the more you read and learn to detect that, the more you're honing your own. So when you sit down to write, when you get to look, we've all been there. You get to a part, you're like, oh my, and I'm just phoning this in now.
Yeah. Story of my life. Well, no, you see, because you must, you were talking about true crime, like murder and stuff, and how, so you must read a lot of other storylines, like true stories like that, to influence you as well.
Sometimes I do, not a lot. I do like some of the, the docuseries and stuff like that, where they kind of go into that. But and I do prefer them when I got an affinity for serial killers. Those are always cool, and I like some of the more ghostly, what actually happened here, like we were talking about before. But as far as reading a lot of that stuff, what I really don't read so much of it. I like the atmosphere and the tone that they bring to a story. So a lot of the fiction I read comes across as a crime novel. But as far as the actual true crime stuff, I don't read too much of it.
Yeah, there's a difference. I've got 20 books out now in true crime. It's a different way of writing. What's important to you? Is it the actual grammar, the style, the structure, or is it the story?
In reading those books, or in my own writing?
In both. Like, how do you translate? Like, so when you read a book, what's a good book to you? Is it just having it all, or is there something is it the story that they're trying to tell you, and the way they get it?
It's really, I mean, it's the same stuff that appeals to me as a writer and sets me to write something is what I also enjoy most in a book. I like I said, I like good character. I like good conflict and drama. I like, believability. You're damn well better be using correct grammar. There better be very few typos, and the grammar should all be there. I'm probably an anomaly in this genre when I say that it doesn't appeal to me if somebody tries to sell me their book and they go, "Oh, it's like a bullet from page one. It's so action packed." That doesn't, it doesn't appeal to me. I mean, action packed works well on TV, I guess, for me, but I can't read 6 pages of a car chase, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I find more enjoyment in the sucking me in slowly into the atmosphere of your story than to spring it on, hot and loose, or whatever the term is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think that I love the sort of action that's in the writing, not necessarily, is there explosion on the first page?
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Location. So the scene, the place that you're writing about, or in the characters, are they? Is the location a character to you as well? Do you write it as a character?
Yes, I do. I think of it. Probably most of the books I've written, it serves that purpose. We write, we feel that we're creative creatures and we're trying to put something on paper straight from our mind. And I think particularly if I'm going to create a town or a city, which most of my books feature prominently fictional towns, let's flex that thought muscle and see how cool we can make it. I don't want to just duplicate New York City and say that's what it is. I think I have a lot of fun creating unique locations and then the people that come from those locations. Come with me. There's several like small towns that Aaron visits throughout the book, and each one is just kind of weirder and a little off kilter and creepier than the next. And it's not just bizarre stuff. It's just that weird sense of just that weird Twilight Zone-y, where are we going? How far into the realm of bizarre are we going to travel through the course of this book? So I was conscious of that with all the locations in that novel. My book prior to this one is a novel called Bone White, and it features a fictional town in Alaska, right below the Arctic Circle, called Dread's Hand. And the legend around that town is that it was an old mining town that the devil came to reside in, and he will occasionally possess people who wander astray through the woods. And I just like that kind of urban legend feel to it, and just so I had a lot of fun with that town. This Arctic, frozen tundra of an old collapsed mining town where all these superstitious locals have nailed giant crosses around the perimeter of the town to keep the devil out, and where the local children wear animal pelts as face masks to trick the devil into thinking they're not people. Stuff like that I just find really, really enticing as a reader and a writer.
So what's your favorite type of horror to read yourself? Or even movie? Do you like older classics, or are you kind of is there modern writers that really kind of get you going?
For movies, look, movies are probably my favorites are going to be the older movies. Anything from what we consider to be the classic horror movies, all the way up through. I don't know if I've seen a good one lately, but it seems like the better things were done back when I was growing up. Writers, writing, I read so much that I always find really good writers and really bad writers at any given point of time when they were writing, at any point in history. I grew up on Stephen King and Peter Straub and all that stuff. I love their books. But I mean, I read Stephen Graham Jones's The Only Good Indians this past year, and it just blew my socks off. It's great to see someone who still, in 2020 when I read it, just being able to write a horror story in 2020 and making it completely unique and heartfelt. And, by the time I was done reading, I'm like, this guy just tapped into something that it just felt so new to me. Writing kind of goes across the board. But you know what? For every great book like that, I read like two, and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm one of those. I don't know if you guys are too, but I'm one of those guys like if I start it, I gotta finish it. I mean, unless it's just killing me. But even if it's I just gotta finish it.
It's like being infinitely hopeful. I'm just always hoping it's going to turn around.
Yeah, well, it's like watching a car crash. Like, where are they going with this?
It's kind of strange how it goes. You talked about the McNamara book. I could only get through half of it. But people love it.
I thought it was good. I did cheat. I listened to it on audio.
Yeah, that's what I do that a lot too now. I have the audio because I had cataract surgery, so I'm getting old.
But I will say, I mean, the thing about that book is there's no conclusion to it, so there's no ending.
Right.
I kind of knew that going in. I was more interested in the framework from a writer's standpoint. So it's hard to kind of just be a reader sometimes. I was interested in the framework of how that book was laid out because I had already started thinking of my own story kind of, and I wanted to say, all right, how was this done?
Yeah.
But I you know what? To each their own.
I think the best thing about it was that she expressed how consumed she was.
Yeah.
And that really came across, and that was kind of the key to that, I think. But hey.
I love stories about it with obsessed characters. Give me an obsessed character, and I'm in. And so I was in on that one because she is obsessed.
Yeah.
That's why I read that more than anything.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So, Ron, do you have a website or a place that you want people to come find you?
You could. Well, I've got a website. It's ronaldmalfi.com. I don't even know when I last updated that, but I am. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I've been told I'm on Instagram, although I've never done anything on it. You can find me anywhere with that stuff. Also, if you're interested on the band side of things, our band website is veerband.net. And our drummer is also our marketing guru. And he's also my brother. But he, at any given time at that website, you can find like cool giveaways, and he's always, stuff to kind of keep the band relevant this past year, with, bunch of different goodies, and he sends out guitar picks and t-shirts and just contests and, all that sort of fun stuff. So, yeah.
How has the last year affected you and your writing and your ability to perform?
The writing, it's been different only because normally I would be sitting home doing this alone, and my wife would be doing her thing, and my kids are at school, and now everybody's in the house. So now it's sort of like you got to split your time a little differently, and we've all kind of learned to do that this past year. Between work and family and all that, from a mind, from your just that headspace, early on it was tough to overcome gonna sit down and write this fictional spooky story when I could look out my window or watch the news and go, oh my. I mean, the real world is just awful right now. Like, what am I even doing? So there was a little bit of that. I got over that hump, because I had to work on the edits for Come With Me, so that got me out of it. And I did kind of get I wrote like a novella during that time, and some short stories, and started outlining another novel. And I've been doing some TV stuff on the side. So that was, you don't want to drop the ball with that stuff. So I kept busy, but it was hard to get my heart into it,
Yeah.
And then on the other end of it, I talk with my editor and I'm like, moving forward with this next book, I said, what are you seeing authors do in regard to COVID? I mean, are they referencing it? And I've read stuff where they do and seen movies where they do. But I said, are they referencing it? Does it become a big issue? I mean, does everybody have to wear a mask in this book? And her response, which is what I was hoping for, her response is, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think people want to read that in everything right now.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to pretend it doesn't exist in my fictional world.
Well, I just wonder if when you got a lot of, if things are stressful, and I ask this of a lot of writers, like, so outside of your house, you got, you got riots going on, and you got protests, and you've got all the political unrest, and then you've got the COVID and all this stuff. So when things are really kind of dark or unsure outside, does that make your writing become darker?
Boy, I don't know if there's that sort of a direct correlation, or if the correlation is almost in the opposite, where you try to brighten things up. I've noticed that less with my writing, but more so really with the band's music. So I write, the majority of the songs for the band. And, our first album came out at the end of 2018, and we toured on that for much of 2019, with our last show being January of 2020. We didn't, before anybody knew anything was going on. And it was funny because the album is called Apocalyptic Baby, and the whole album concept is the apocalypse. So, and then the follow-up album, which we already had planned, was going to be the antidote album to the apocalypse, the more human sounding, uplifting, more songs to drag us out of that. So those were like the two album theme. And so to be like thrust now in the middle of this bizarre reality with half an album being recorded, where you're almost like looking into a crystal ball while you were working on this thing. Of Jesus Christ, did we cause this? Is this some cosmic, wrench in the system here? So that's been weird. So I have noticed that a lot of those earlier songs in the beginning of 2020 started off kind of dark and dreary, and that I've noticed that my writing has somehow become brighter and poppier. As far as the songs go. Yeah. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just, enough's enough seeing the news and you just want to hear something more uplifting or what it is. But I have noticed it more cleanly in that than I have in my fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. It might be more obvious. Well, it's quite a interesting road and life you lead. So, thank you for coming on the show. Our guest has been Ronald Balfe. The newest book coming out in July is Come With Me. Glad you were here.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.